Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur, a guy who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book. It's called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach people how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sononify Technology. We are a software engineering firm with teams in both the US and Latin America. And today I am joined by Gajus Kuizinas, who is the co-founder and CTO at a company called Contra. He's been a longtime engineer, architect, CTO, and founder. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this one. Gajus, welcome, my friend.
Hey, Steve. Great to be here.
If you would, take a few minutes and walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Okay, happy to. I always like it to start with the unusual beginnings, because the unusual beginnings is that I grew up in a very heavy arts family. Like everyone in my family were just like very deep in arts, very well known in the art space. And as a result, I had to figure out like, where do I go in life that's like as far away as from arts as possible.
You wanted to get away, huh? You needed something different.
I wanted my own name. I wanted to, walk in a room and I wanted to be recognized for the things that I do independent than anything else. So that was the context. And, I grew up in Lithuania at a time. I would go to PC cafeterias, the places you go to get access to the internet. And quickly people learned that I'm good with computers. They started to hire me to first secure the infrastructure of those PC cafeterias. Then the word spread. I got recruited to some of the dating sites early on to help them with their marketing campaigns, the ads systems. And it kind of just like, snowballed from there. So then I go to UK. I start to freelance. I start to create a digital agency for movie advertising, realize there's ceiling to how big an agency can grow. So I pivot to a B2C business for Fandango for Europe. Then from Fandango to Europe, I go to, there's a data play here that I'm very excited about. I decide to build the largest data aggregator in the entertainment space. We're collecting data from every cinema in the world except for Asia and selling it to all the major Hollywood studios. And long story short, there's a bit of an unfortunate ending to all of this. As much as I like to geek out about technology and everything, COVID happens and everything cinema related just goes kaboom. And I'm on the ice, have to figure out like, what's the next thing? I go to San Francisco. I join On Deck, which is this amazing community for founders, and I meet my co-founder. We're already prototyping similar things and we start Contra. So that's a very quick run through.
Sounds like you've been all around the world.
Yeah.
Tell us about your company Contra that you co-founded.
It's a very special company. First of all, it's a talent marketplace. We have over 1 million creatives, graphic designers, video editors, you name it, we have it. We specialize in kind of higher end of the talent. Now, the twist is, and where we challenge the norms is, we looked at every marketplace on the talent markets in particular, and they all have commission fees. We decided we're going to remove the commission fees from the business. So we're going to innovate on the business model. And we're going to kind of see like what happens when you remove this major component that's keeping all of this thing together. How do you figure out the new business model? And what does it mean for how the product evolves? And as you can imagine, the product evolved in very unexpected ways that put us, after about 6 years now of kind of like exploring where we're going. We're in this very unique position where we're the only marketplace to have official partnerships with almost every major creator tool in the market. So whether that's Canva, Framer, Webflow, you name it, they're our official partners. And the reason they partner with us is because we don't have a commission and we encourage this very open identity and attract the best people as a result of that. So that is Contra in a blink of an eye.
All right. So compare it to an Upwork or for us.
Oh, man, I don't like comparisons, but I can do it. When you do the comparison, actually, funny is asking, because the biggest problem for us, the biggest struggle for us was the comparison to the existing platforms, because people kind of like try to find, like how you're similar to something. So I'll say this, like the bad parts of Upwork are basically that they have the commissions and they control your relationship, how you interact with the clients. In other words, the best kind of people, that the freelancers, when they just start their journey, they're looking where they're good at. They might join platforms like Upwork and they might get a few contracts. It's a great start. It's a great way to start. They might get a few contracts, few clients. They will build the trust. They'll build trust in their own capabilities. But once they get really good, they drop off the platform. The reason they drop off the platform is because they don't want to give away that commission, right? So that's where we come in. We basically started to think like, how do you create a platform that fills a vacuum where all these best people disappear off the network? Like, how can you create a new home for them? So in many ways, we're more similar to the platforms like LinkedIn, where we focus on people's professional identities. We just happen to have every component of a marketplace.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
So tell us about the tech behind your company and the projects you guys are working on.
How deep do you want to go into tech?
Well, this is Software Leaders Uncensored, so you could geek out here a little bit, and if you go too far, I'll throw something at you.
All right. I'll say this. So we got pretty fortunate with our technology choices. The crazy thing about Contra is that since the beginning, so almost like five and a half years to be precise, we basically haven't changed a single piece of technology choice, with the exception of one, which is flow type. We started with flow type, we switched to TypeScript along the way. Now, I partly attribute this to the fact that when we were starting the company, and specifically when I was evaluating, like, what are we building towards? What are the challenges we're going to face? What are the existing platforms out there that kind of like mimic the complexity and structure of our product? I'm deep in the open source ecosystem, so I'm like exposed a lot to like what are people creating in those companies, especially in time. So basically, we looked at, okay, what is Facebook's stack? What are they using? And what can we take from that into our stack and adopt? So we did pretty, I
like that approach. I, as an older guy, I like to compare the McDonald's and Burger King, where Burger King would just sit there and let McDonald's try new stuff, do it, and essentially just copy what works. To your point, I like that approach.
You kind of have to. And you also like, there's a beauty in the fact that you're not just picking and choosing like random technologies from different companies. You're kind of looking at someone who's been doing this like for a long time, build this tremendously big platform. And you're saying like, it hurts because some of these technologies are esoteric, but we're going to adopt them and we're going to, roll with them. So I think the foundation, the biggest technology choice that is to this day unconventional is the use of Relay. I don't know how well you're familiar with Relay, but it's a technology developed by Facebook that in combination with GraphQL allows you to very efficiently fetch the data and avoid data overfetching issues. It avoids you into locking into specific API patterns, and it's fairly secure if you deploy it in a specific way. So the upside is that it's an amazing technology. It's one of my favorite technologies. We rely on it entirely. The downside is it's to this day extremely esoteric. Like, I don't know many other projects that are using this outside of Facebook and us at a scale that we're doing it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, before the show, you mentioned Indie.ai. Is that part of your platform or something separate you're building?
Indie.ai. It's a very fun project. I like to talk about it because we're doing something that I think no one has ever done. Basically, if you think about the problem that we're solving, we're fundamentally trying to find job opportunities for people on our platform. And we're a relatively small network. We're 1.5 million people. So the network effects are still like accumulating and more clients are getting pulled into the network, but there's not enough compared to what's out there in the world. So basically we had this idea, okay, what if we developed a browser extension that users install when they sign up, and that browser extension will tap into users' existing networks that exist on LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. Literally take every single post that it finds in their network by people that are their friends or second-degree connections, send them to our servers, and then we're going to process those posts with AI to identify work opportunities for those people. So instead of scrolling every single day as a freelancer through your feed, you basically install this extension, you set your preferences. I want like job opportunities for designers, and it will send you a curated list every single day of the things that it found in your feed. Now, the beauty is that it's not some anonymous post on the internet. It's someone from your network that you otherwise would have overlooked. And there's some cool challenges there.
Are you targeting like job posts that they're doing? What are you targeting there?
It's anything. It's a fundraising event. It's someone saying that they need help building something, that they're stuck with a problem. Basically, any opportunity where expertise is required that's aligned with person's interests. Because fundamentally, we don't believe that, as is in sales, it's usually not a single touch point that you like get a good client. You interact with people, you build value, build credibility in the network, and you get eventually something out of it. That's the thesis behind it.
Interesting. Tell
Yeah.
us about your software engineering team, the work model you guys do, how you go about that.
We're a pretty lean team, especially considering how large the platform is. So we're 10 software engineers at the moment. Everyone is working independently. They have their kind of like pods of knowledge. They have full context of the things we do. If you're curious about the hierarchy, it's basically we have PMs that create high level projects. So like these are the things we want to achieve. These are the goals. Then individual people within the teams, they take responsibility. They break them down into smaller tasks, which are then synced to the rest of the team to make sure that we're aligned on the scope, and they take full ownership of it. Now, the cool thing about how we structured our engineering teams, and I think this is extremely unique to us, at least personally, I've not seen this anywhere else, is that from the very beginning, we're a remote organization, by the way, fully remote. From the very beginning, I realized that the most efficiencies lost is when you're effectively blocked by someone and waiting for someone's input to move ahead on either shipping the code or something. So we developed this concept called Loom-Driven Development. Now, Loom are these short videos that you can record with a tap of a button. And basically the way it works is once you are ready to ship some code, all you have to do is record the Loom of you going through the code changes, explaining why you've done the changes the way that you've done, and then doing a quick smoke test to show that they're working in production as per the spec that's required. Now, the funny thing is that, as you would imagine, the first couple of times you're trying to record this Loom, you're going to keep running into like a bugs, issues, shortcomings, things you didn't consider. So it becomes this like a self-review process that enables people to ship quality code without any external blockers. In effect, almost entire code base, with the exception of the first 2 years, is currently contributed using self-review PRs using this method of Loom-driven development.
Interesting. Now, is that something you created, or haven't heard that terminology of Loom-driven development? Is that
I've been trying to coin it for like 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah. I just think it's one of those things where when people come to our organization, they're like very surprised. Like, do you want me to record Looms every day? And it's a bit of a learning curve because, if you're not used to recording yourself, like talking about things and etc., you can see how the first couple of videos take people, like, I'm not exaggerating, like hours. Because everyone's panicking, like, how will I appear? Do I sound smart? Do I make mistakes? And et cetera, et cetera. Kind of like a podcast, right? And so they keep recording, but over time you get good at it and it becomes like a smooth process. You just see a lot of pauses in the video recording.
I like that a lot. And, one of the cool things about hosting a podcast with smart people is I get to learn new stuff every day. And I like that a lot. Loom-driven development concept. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So as a tech leader, Gajus, what, as we're in Q4 2025, what is the biggest challenge you're facing now?
We're kind of past the biggest challenge. I'd say, but I can talk more in retrospective. I say like this year in particular has been like never before challenging to balance business expectations and technology expectations, especially because of everything that's happening in AI. The amount of times that I'll be approached by someone who says like, oh my God, you guys are not vibe coding, like you're not using AI for everything. And you kind of like, and usually they are not technical people. They're the people who will read, the headlines and like newsletters and whatever. And kind of like bridging that gap of the expectations of like, what is the actual improvement versus what is portrayed in media. It has been a real challenge because on one hand, like, my job as a CTO is to make sure that we're on the cutting edge. But on the other hand, is to make sure that we're developing in a sustainable way. And that's secure, safe, integral to how we want to build a company, sustainable. So balancing that has been really hard over the last year.
All the hype around AI, and it's been the past 2 years have been pretty amazing with the advancements, with what's to come. But my gosh, one of the hardest challenges is when you have non-technical other executives, board members, investors, and they say, hey, my buddy was able to cut 60% of costs because of AI. Why aren't you doing that? And trying to explain to them when they just don't get it. That's a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's especially a challenge because people, the sort of like one-shot prompting gives you pretty astonishing results. Like, I say, like develop me this like I don't know, guest book, whatever, and it will output something that looks like pretty solid. The problem is when you actually start, building towards something that's production worthy. And the way that I kind of countered this over the last year is that anytime that I'm faced with this conversation, I would just have a very simple conversation. Like, let's figure out a project and let's have you build it. I'll support you throughout the way, even if you get stuck. I'll help you with the setup. I'll help you with everything. But like, I want you to build something that you would feel comfortable putting in front of our users. I've had a few of those conversations, and they usually start with a lot of optimism, a lot of fun, and they kind of quickly stop, go to a halt, and you're like, well, this is nonsense. Like, this is not what I wanted. Like, I want the polish, I want the detail, I want this to work, I want this to be secure, I want this to scale, whatever. And I think that reality check comes pretty quick if you actually start building something as opposed to just doing like a 20-minute prototype.
I like it. So you've had some unique experiences with vibe coding and how you guys evolved from it and the painful lessons. Talk about that if you would.
Yeah, I think, where do you start? I think vibe coding is interesting because it's especially, so I'll start a little context. So the way we've engaged vibe coding is we didn't encourage it internally. We decided to outsource kind of some of these experiments and see like, what do you get out of this? And it's interesting because I remember the initial handover and I'm thinking to myself, wow, like there's a lot of code here. And, done in such a short amount of time, we would have never done this much in-house. And then I'm looking, wow, there's a lot of documentation here too. And so like the first couple, kind of like the review process is like everything is splendid. And we kind of rolled with that project for the initial sort of like an MVP stage. But then when we started like, okay, we need to polish this and scale this to millions of users. We need to make these adjustments. We need to make sure that it doesn't like crash users' browser and all the other things. And then you kind of just, once you start taking ownership over the product that's been vibe coded, you start like the reality kicks in. You realize that vast majority of the code is just nonsensical workarounds. It just barely made it work. The comments are basically describing literally what the line is doing as opposed to the reasoning behind it, and kind of layers and layers of that. Unfortunately, our learning is that outside of the prototype phase, if you go from the vibe coded prototype into using that code in production, that's a mistake because rewriting it to your conventions, standards, security, whatever, is likely going to take you a lot more effort than it would have taken you to set a solid foundation. And the reason for this is because, simply put, the vibe coded code base does not have the mental context, and you do not have the mental context of like why the code is written in such a way. So it's almost like, even before vibe coding, the hardest thing was always like taking an existing project, even if you buy a project or you absorb a team or something like this, and then learning how to work within that code base because you don't have the mental context of why the decisions were done this way. And with vibe code in particular, that became very evident. So, and then internally, we never had to really eventually we did set clear expectations, but it kind of happened through naturally because I would spot check a few PRs here and there to see like what's being merged. And historically, if you see something odd, at least if I saw something odd as a CTO, I would always assume my ignorance, meaning that a person who wrote this code, they probably put in a lot of thought into thinking through the problem and they know better than me. And probably the only thing that's lacking here is a comment explaining like why we're doing it the way that we're doing it. What I've noticed happening more when kind of like the vibe code culture hype peaked is that there were a few PRs where I would DM someone and ask, hey, this is like interesting piece of code. I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain to me why you've done that way? And then you can hear like a radio silence for a longer time and followed up by an awkward, message. Hey man, like, sorry, I don't really know. It'll never happen again. And we had these like a few random interactions and then just basically set a very simple precedent. Like, look, I'm not going to police people for whether you vibe code or not. You make your own bed, like you'll sleep how you make your own bed. And we want to treat each other with respect. And we want to continue to have responsibility over every single line of code that's being committed. That was the
Well,
basically guiding principle.
I would make the comment that experienced engineering leaders have come to that conclusion that vibe coding is great for prototypes, but not for production. And the people who try to claim they are for production are the ones who don't really have corporate production ready environments. They're doing stuff very small. But it is amazing how it's changed the process of getting to prototype and initial MVP.
Yeah.
But which, you have to get that concept down, you have to get user buy-in. But to make it production ready, I agree with you. That's a whole different process.
Well, it's funny you say that because in a way, I actually see a new niche emerging for these vibe coding tools that is less talked about. And it's in the handover process from non-technical people to technical people. We especially see this a lot in the marketplace where people that usually would come with, historically would have come with like pretty poor job descriptions. Now they come with a prototype of the thing that they want to build, which is a few degrees better than a bad description because they've iterated on it. They kind of got a sense of how it feels when you click around. So it actually bridges the gap in communication between the two worlds. And in that regard, I see it helpful. It's a shame that I don't see more companies exploring that use case, but it's definitely where I see some of the things heading in the vibe coding space.
I think that's a great point. Now, I know you have some views on growth hacking and the responsibility of the CTO with that. Talk about that if you would.
The first couple of things that come to my mind are, I guess in a way they're growth hacking because they are things that effectively propelled our brand and growth. I find the story, for instance, like how you get brand secured these days is a big part of like starting a company. Like Contra.com, we bought that, but then afterwards you have Twitter handle, Facebook handle, Instagram handle, LinkedIn handle. How the hell do you get those? And I think like there's some interesting stories behind it. I'll tell you one where specifically Twitter in particular. I tried to get the Twitter handle. I messaged the person and I basically said like, hey, I'm starting this company. I would really want your Twitter handle. And basically he replied to me saying like, I'm not going to sell you the Twitter handle, but I like what your company is doing. Can I acquire your company? I'm like, oh my God, this is not where I was heading with this conversation. Anyway, turns out that the guy is a prince in one of the Saudi areas, and so it's going to be hard to make the sale. But anyway, long story short, he really likes me and like messaged me the next day saying like, "Hey, you can give me another handle." I'm not going to say what's the name of the handle, but it was like a very specific handle. I'll trade it for you. It's like a very high value handle. Anyway, so I then reach out to the owner of that handle and agree to buy it for a obscene amount of money. But then the guy messaged me back saying, hey, I actually do not have access to this account anymore. It turns out I've lost emails and everything. I asked,
Oh,
what was your
geez.
email? What was your email, buddy? We've been at this for like a couple of weeks now. And he tells me his email. And then I have this moment of realization. The domain name behind the email has expired and is available for sale. So I buy the domain name. I set up redirect for all the emails. I go through the password reset flow. I get access to the handle, and that's how we secure the handle.
Well, and you didn't have to pay the obscene amount of money at that point, I guess.
Exactly. But it's funny. Like I think the big part of the growth hacking story is like figuring out, especially in the early days, like how do you acquire assets or access to people that are otherwise just not readily accessible or even can be bought. Yeah.
I think that's a unique perspective to bring forward. What about Gaius? What are some brutal lessons you've learned in your journey that if you could go back and tell your younger self, what would those be?
Brutal lessons. I think even in Contra is kind of a reminder of some of the things. One of them is how it's important to stick to the long-term vision, especially when there are a lot of kind of these short-term forces that are pushing you in the left and right direction. And how if you compromise on things, the whole vision collapses. I talked a lot about how, there's this Contra, there's this big product, and we raise a lot of funding, yada, yada. But like all those things can be fairly easy replicated if someone else wanted to like come with the same vision, raise lots of money, etc. The hard thing about it was for 5 years and a half to build trust with users and everyone around you that you're going to stick to the core principles that make your business unique while making it extremely damn hard to build a business. Building a zero commission, no take rate marketplace is not something that, a lot of investors will cheer you on after a couple of years of building. There's going to be a pressure like, why don't you just take like 2% or something? Why don't you just like feature gate some of the features so that people have to pay to get access to those features? And I think the hard thing was to learn to treat all of the pressures as kind of like a filter for clarity. Like you really need to understand like why you're doing it and what are the sort of uncompromisable things that you have to just power through, no matter, what the short term, pains are. Yeah, I'd say like the same lesson would apply to quite a few things I've built in the past. I'd say anything that I've built, especially in the earlier days, that you kind of compromise because maybe an investor suggested to you that will be a faster path or something like this. It just kind of, you know, collapse because either you lose your own inertia because it's no longer the thing that you were building towards, or the users lose trust in what you're building because it's no longer the thing that you promised them or onboarded them with.
I think that's great insight. Gaius, thank you for getting uncensored with us today.
Of course, Steve.
Just from this conversation, I could tell you have a unique, creative approach that's been learned through both successes and failures, which unfortunately, I wish there was a better way to learn than from failures. But I think when you have successes, you get cocky, and failures make you really examine what occurred.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story about your vision for Contra. Before we wrap, what's your no BS advice for today's tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these interesting times?
I know, go big or go home. It's as simple as that. You have to commit to an uncompromised path, kind of what I just said, and just really power through that vision. Yeah.
I love it. Go big or go home. We're of the similar cloth here. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, do the right thing. Share it with your competitors. Might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.